welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today.
I am so excited to be here. Thank you so much, Christy.
Oh my God, it's awesome. It's awesome. You are an inspiration to me. I love watching your growth. And I love how you
Likewise.
Oh, thank you. I love how you come into the space that you're in now. Can you just kind of give our community a little background of how you got to be where you are?
Of course, yeah. So I'll try to give you the briefer version, but at least it's got the story within it. And that is that I had ended a 1-year job with a documentary filmmaker doing distribution and research and everything back in 2002, early 2002. And for those of us who are old enough to remember, it was not a great time economically. It was not a great time in a lot of ways in our country because we had just gone through 9/11, but also the dot-com bust was happening. So everybody I knew who had fabulous jobs 6 months ago were, collecting unemployment. And so I had 3 separate jobs. I'd originally been trained as a graphic designer in college. And honestly, I'm not a very good graphic designer, I'll be honest. And not because of the training. It's purely on me. But I was doing some independent freelance graphic design work. I was cooking pizzas in a restaurant, and I was, which is no longer there than the South End of Boston. And I was answering phones in a rental office for a real estate company. One of my neighbors said, are you still looking for work? Give me your resume. I'm going to hand it over to Andrea. And so she hired me, and that began this journey, which over the last 22 years has seen me in marketing roles, leading the marketing department and doing sales coaching and business planning, and now the CEO of the company. And the company's changed over that time. So it's gone from being 3 offices and about 40 agents to we now have nearly 30 offices and over 500 agents. So it's been growth personally. It's been growth professionally for both me and the company.
That's incredible. And under your leadership, all of that has happened, especially like a big portion of it has happened in the last probably 5 to 8 years. You guys have done a ton of acquisitions. Yeah. And I think your volume is like north of 4 billion, right?
That's right.
About that?
Well, we did just about 3 billion last year. We did north of 4 the year before, but as we all know, the last 18 months or so have been kind of challenging as a result of the mortgage interest rates being all over the place for a while and really changing the affordability picture for some people. But those have been taming over the last 6 to 12 months. We've started to see a little more normalcy. We've started to see consumers get more comfortable with the numbers. Mm-hmm. And we've seen the market really start to come back. And we're so fortunate being in the greater Boston area and down through the Cape and up to the North Shore. This Eastern Massachusetts area the market tends not to be very boom and bust like you see around the country. Yeah. And that's for a lot of reasons. You can sit and theorize over what are all the contributing factors there. But a big part of it is that there's just not a lot of housing. I mean, there's not a lot of land. It's so we're never building so much that at some point the whole thing kind of collapses and then you have to go back into the
100%. 100%. And so I want to go back to how you started out. And I think we talked about this when we met months back. You follow Will Guidara, right?
Yes. Love Will Guidara.
Yes. And one of the things I respect about him is he did every job in the company.
Yep.
Right. Like he did busboy, he was dishwasher, he worked in the front and in the back. And you did that too. And so I have 2 questions. The first one is, was there an aha moment or was there a moment in your career where you were like, I have leadership capabilities. Like I am a leader. That's my first question.
That's a great question. I think it was more of an evolution. My mentor, Larry, he's an icon in the real estate industry, but he's also just an extraordinary human being. I mean, the man has lived like multiple lives, essentially, when you look at his career.
But he was really the first person to say it to me. I think there were elements of leadership I could see that naturally were occurring, that I like to solve problems. It's fun for me.
Yeah.
And I also like to take care of other people. And I think those two things are inherently in the DNA of a good leader. But understanding that I could lead a company was really more of a conversation that happened between Larry and me some time ago. And I thought to myself, wow, I guess, well, if he thinks it could happen, then that means something.
Yeah.
That's not just me thinking, well, it would be interesting. It's more like, no, you could do this. And I think, it's one thing to believe in yourself. And I think we all really need to work on that. I know it's hard for a lot of us to do that, but it's so much easier when someone that you trust and you admire believes in you. That's like, throwing fuel on the fire. That's when you start having some real movement forward.
Oh my God. I love that. And you're so right on. And I think you and I have had this conversation too. My person in that realm was Paul Mydelsky. Like, he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And I think you're right. You can, yes, we all have to work on believing in ourselves, but sometimes you just need that push, because it's almost like you can't see the forest through the trees, yes. Right? Like, you're in it, and sometimes you just can't always see it. And I think for women too, we especially don't see it because, you and I are the same generation growing up. We didn't see a lot of people like us in leadership positions.
That's right. Representation is hugely important. And I think people sometimes underestimate how important it is, because when you're a little kid, if you don't see someone who looks like you in a position, you don't even think it's possible.
Yes.
Your brain doesn't dare think of it unless you're one of those extraordinary people.
Yes.
Unless you're like an Amelia Earhart, or an Oprah Winfrey.
Or an Oprah, right?
Someone who didn't see themselves, and yet somehow there was that spark that they just kept alive and kept pushing forward.
That's right.
But that's I think that's a lot to expect from somebody. I even think about it. If you put it in real estate terms, if you're a real estate agent out there, how many of your buyers can envision a house with different furniture and different colors on the walls, or with something slightly moved? Almost none of them can, which is why staging is so important. So visualization is a tough thing for us to do when it comes to mapping out your future. Yes. And for somebody else who's doing it to say, you can do this too, is huge. And I think that's why if you recognize that you have had mentors, and I guarantee you that you've had them in your life, then it's important for you to understand the importance of you to also be a mentor in kind. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to sit down with someone every week and go through things. But just when you recognize that somebody's done something well, or that they've got a special skill, say it to them.
Yes.
Because that can be a hugely influential moment in their lives.
Yep.
So I think it's incumbent on all of us to recognize the greatness in others and to mention it.
I saw like a short reel Jennifer Aniston yesterday. I don't even know what she was at a podium for. And she said there was a parental figure when she was 11 years old, and they were at a table, and the parental figure told her, you can be excused now because you have nothing to add to this conversation. And that stayed with her through adulthood. And it still comes back when she's in a space that she's uncomfortable with, right? In front of people. And so the opposite can happen too.
Yes, absolutely.
And so you have to be mindful that don't listen to everything. If somebody tells you can't,
yes,
let that be the fuel to say that you can.
Yes. Well, and I think, one of the things that we all need to be thinking about and understand about ourselves is that we've been programmed.
Yes.
Right? So we're all blank slates to some extent. I mean, obviously there is programming in our DNA and epigenetics and all of these other really fascinating things that really smart people, much smarter than me, have studied for many years. But we have all had experiences. We've been told things. We've witnessed things. And those things become our programming, like a computer, right? Mm-hmm. And the way that we react to situations all has to do with our programming.
Yes.
So when you understand that you've been programmed, that's the first step. The second step is figuring out what programming is serving you well, mm-hmm. and what programming isn't. Mm-hmm. And what are you going to do to cast that programming code out and to reprogram? And my story was featured in a chapter of a best-selling book by John Acuff called Soundtracks. And the concept behind soundtracks is that each of us is, we have these messages that go on in our heads on a regular basis. Like that would be one. Jennifer Aniston's story is a great example of that. You have nothing to contribute to this conversation. You're excused. So that plays in the back of our head all the time, and we all have them. So the question to ask yourself when you realize there's a soundtrack there, and again, the first step is understanding that it's there. But the questions to ask yourself are, is it true? Is it kind? And is it useful? And a lot of times when you look at those things, and if they've been holding you back, probably none of those is a yes.
Yeah.
Well, now it's the time to say, what do I have to do now so I can land in a much better spot and I can be making better decisions for myself? Or I can respond to situations more thoughtfully in a way that serves me as opposed to reacting emotionally. Mm-hmm. And I think that's the part of personal growth and spiritual growth that we all need to go through, is to understand ourselves and to take some control over that, which is, by the way, not easy.
It isn't. It isn't. Because I think when you serve yourself, then it's like your oxygen mask, right? Like you serve yourself, then you can serve others. So that's a great segue into your own growth. So like about a year and a half or 2 years ago, you started on this physical growth. Yep. And then now you're in this spiritual growth. Take us back. Tell us what prompted that. And tell us about it.
Sure. So back around the holidays, so November, December-ish of 2022, I learned from a couple of colleagues that they were going to be going out on maternity leave. And they are both brilliant people who I lead the company with. This CEO job, people are like, oh, you're the leader. And it's like, I'm among a group of brilliant people. Like I'm not the smartest person in the room. that is the way it should be. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. But so two of those really important critical figures were going to be going out on maternity leave within weeks of each other. And I thought to myself, this is going to be tough. Also combined to that I was at the time 47 years old and feeling pretty awful. Just really tired all the time. Just not sleeping well, certainly not exercising or prioritizing my health, my physical health. So that's the background. Then enter in one of our agents, Ryan, who had been working with a personal trainer remotely. And this guy was brilliant. And I say personal trainer now because that was my understanding at the time. But what I learned was he was actually really someone who understands physical health in a way I've never heard of before. And his name is Aaron Williamson. And he's absolutely brilliant. He's a former Marine. He got into physical fitness when he was in Okinawa. His career is incredible in the military. He was a body bearer, this is the group of people who do these incredible burial ceremonies for families. And he was in a combat environment. He came back. He was homeless for a while, suffering with PTSD, as so many returning military folks do. And really struggling to adapt back into civilian life. A job fell through and there were other things going on. And so he's living out of his car and all he's got is fitness. So he keeps his gym membership, and just so happens at the time he's living in New Orleans, he starts training people there. And then there are a lot of movies being made there. So he starts training actors and he becomes the go-to guy. You have somebody who is just doing regular roles and they have to be a superhero in a few months. You call Aaron Williamson and he does the job for you. And he's worked with like The Rock and Stallone and like all of these famous people. And anyhow, we had a conversation. He was looking to kind of expand in terms of his speaking capability, engagements and things like that, and kind of expand his business as a health coach and all of these other things. And so I made some introductions. We talked for a while. And then I said, what am I doing? I feel sicker than I've ever felt. And I really have to be in better condition for lots of reasons, including work. So I called him back and said, would you train me? And he said, well, what are you looking for? I said, I need to be in peak condition. He said, do you mean physically or mentally? And I said, oh, this is my guy, because those two things are connected. So that began a journey for me. And it was, I thought it was going to be about weight loss and just getting fit. It became about so much more than that. It became about prioritizing my health and understanding that the fuel I'm putting into my body and the way I'm treating my body has a huge effect on me, both mentally and physically. And the timing was incredible because, several months later, after we were done with that program, I also went through a difficult time emotionally because I lost several family members within a very short period of time. And so there was that part of the journey. And then it started to kind of expand, and it continues to this day. And I'm not sure that this journey is ever going to end. I kind of don't want it to.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like at this stage of our lives, we come alive.
You too. I
Right?
really do too. Yeah, I think there's, your 20s are confusing. And if someone's listening and they're in their 20s, just know if you're confused and you're feeling lost, that is completely normal. That is it's like, I call it the quarter life crisis. Everybody goes through it. Everybody I've ever spoken to has gone through that. So that's, it's 20s are really confusing time. In your 30s, you start to get to know who you are. And I feel like your 40s are about, what do I want?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
And now I'm excited for my 50s. I'll be 50 at the end of this year. And I'm like so excited for that because I am seeing, again, representation. I'm seeing so many people who are in their 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s and 90s doing incredible things. There's a doctor, her name is Gladys McGarry, I think is her name. She's 103. She just wrote her first book. Like,
oh my God.
Come on. Like there is so much available to us. But we first have to take care of ourselves. It's the oxygen mask thing, like you said, like they tell you on an airplane, put yours on first, and then you can help the person next to you. And so I really credit Aaron, who has become a very good friend. I call him my brother. I love that man. I credit him with really turning things around and teaching me more about myself, frankly, than my personal doctor ever did. And honestly, not that he ever did therapy, but more than most therapists ever did for me. So he's an
100%.
Extraordinary person.
That is amazing. And I watched your journey physically because you did document it on social media every single day, what you did. And
begrudgingly, I got to tell you, Christine Newell was the one who said, if you're going to do this, because I called her and said, it's a lot of money. I hadn't ever spent money on myself in that kind of way. And she said, first of all, I think you should do it. Second of all, I think you should show it. And I was like, ugh, no one's going to want to watch me do this. And she said, you would be surprised. And that was the beginning of me realizing that I can help other people by sharing my own vulnerabilities and challenges because 100%. We all have them. And people tend to suffer going, I'm the only one feeling this way. So yes, I did share it, but I did so begrudgingly.
Yeah, you did. And, I think it's like Larry telling you in the beginning, you can do this. It's you realizing how much people are looking to you for inspiration and direction and guidance and that type of thing. When you become vulnerable, when you put yourself out there, when you show that you still have something to learn and something to gain by taking care of yourself, it gives people permission to do that. Absolutely.
Yeah, maybe that's true. It's hard for me to see because I'm on this side of it. But what I got out of it was that I think most people in today's day and age in particular, maybe because we've become more and more disconnected from one another. There's a great book called Tribe. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend it. I think you and I spoke about it, but Sebastian Junger, who happens to be from Belmont, which is where I live. But he wrote this fabulous book, and it's about how dangerous disconnection from one another is, essentially, because we're tribal creatures, right? Cows herd, birds flock, we tribe. And so in an era where we've become more and more disconnected, there's, I think, a tendency for many of us to suffer silently. Like, I'm the only one who feels this way. I mean, I'm checking out social media and everybody looks great. So I must be the only weirdo. And I think what I learned is people would reach out to me. They were realizing, oh my God, I had no idea you were having the same struggle I was having. And so that, I will say, over the course of my leadership career, I have tried to be as vulnerable as I can with people and tell them I suffer from anxiety and depression. And they're like, You what? And I'm like, oh my God. And they're like, but you seem so happy. I'm like, sometimes I have to manufacture it to manifest it, and sometimes it's very hard. And, but I just do the best I can. And that sometimes just doing that allows me to connect with people. And now the result is neither of us feels alone.
Yeah.
It's just as good for me as it is for them.
Yes. It goes back to being tribal and feeling like, you're part of a community. So take me now to this spiritual side that you're in. You're really working on this spiritual growth for yourself. Yep. What is that like? And what is that about?
Well, it's interesting. I think of spirituality as how you see the world beyond the minutia and all of the stuff we have to do every single day. Right. So that could be your purpose. It could be the meaning of life. It might be what happens to us when we're gone. I mean, all of those things kind of, are under the blanket of spirituality in my mind. And I will tell you that I think what really tipped it off for me was that one of the things Aaron wanted me to do every morning was go for walks. And he said, preferably in nature if you can. But he said, I get it. Like, you're a busy person, you have a family, you have a job, you have all of these things. You can't always be driving to go find, nature. And being the kind of person I was like, I'll just sit in my basement on the bike for the cardio. And a couple of things shook me out of that. And I finally said, fine, I'll do the walk. And at first I was listening to my podcast or whatever else. I was listening to a book at the time. And then I thought, maybe I should do this without that. And what started to happen was I started to be much more present, which I think is something that's so hard to do in today's day and age, because we get dopamine hits out of doom scrolling on our phones. We get dopamine hits out of checking our email. There are all these things that we do, and they don't allow us to be present. And we're constantly being dragged off somewhere else. So I started doing these walks without headphones in and without my phone within reach. And I started to realize that there was so much more around me than I was recognizing. Yeah, the sounds of the birds and the frogs. I mean, the damn frogs sounded like an orchestra of pump organs in the morning, So it became this very sensory experience. And I started to realize that we're all kind of connected in different ways. And it changed what I started to listen to and read. And I started listening to a lot of Pema Chodron, who is a Buddhist nun who's brilliant. And a number of other just really extraordinary people who have broken down human existence and our experience in a very different way. And so that has really been the thrust of my life now is starting to listen to my intuition more and to have more of those experiences where I feel connected to everything around me. And it sounds so woo-woo and nuts. I mean, I'm a type A person, but it's just, it has been so incredibly helpful. And, it started with that experience of walking in the woods, and then, being with my mother and my stepfather as he was dying was just like another one of those experiences where I was like, wow, this is so much more about these meat suits, as I've heard them called, right? It's so much more than these pumping organs and all of these things that are working in our bodies. There is this other thing that's happening, and I find that to be even more valuable. And I will tell you, my experience sitting with you, my experience that I have, I'm going to have lunch with my friend Heather today if everything comes together. Experience sitting with my friend Brad or my friend Nicole, all of these people, Trish, who are in my lives, who I love dearly, Sarah, all these folks. There's a vibration that happens when we're on the same path. There's something when we get into these deep conversations, there's something so special about that moment. And for me, that's spirituality. It's about our connection to each other. It's about our connection to the world around us. It's something that is much more than our normal acknowledged human experience.
Oh, I'm like, he's speaking my language. I'm tearing up. And I think, when you say this is like woo woo. Yeah. Yes. And it's the truth. Yeah. It's the truth. Yeah. And I think that, you are already somebody who when you sit in front of you, I feel, and I'm guessing I'm not the only one. You feel like you're the only person in the room.
Oh, well, that's sweet. I mean, I do try to genuinely be in the experience with the person I'm with.
Yes.
Does that mean I can always do that? No, of course not.
Yes.
You know, I'm a middle-aged woman in 2024 with a job and a family and everything else. So my phone is constantly buzzing. I've got to watch the buzzes. Dear Lord. I mean, I can almost sense I've got emails coming in even without those things.
Yes.
But, you know, I think that the next step with spirituality or physical fitness or emotional fitness, any of those things, is how can I use this in my daily life?
Yes.
And it has become a huge part of my leadership approach. You know, in the real estate industry, and you and I are both entrenched in it, there is a lot of change going on right now. And for some people, it feels like a crisis. And for a number of people, it just feels like a big shakeup. And I think the connection to one another is something that can lead us through that. And so I've tried really hard to do that, you know, talk to colleagues all over the country who are facing this. Yep. You know, talking to obviously the amazing agents in our company and the amazing leaders in our company and collaborating together and making sure that we're staying on the goal that we have, which is how can we be the best to the people that we serve, which is our agents and their clients? Yeah. How can we really serve them the best? So that really kind of gets into that, like connecting with one another and listening to one another and finding ways to move together through this challenging time. And that's when crisis becomes opportunity for all of us.
100%.
To connect better together. So you can take those things that you learn in your own emotional or spiritual or physically, you know, growth journey, whatever you want to do, and to start using it in the practice of what you're doing on a daily basis. And that's what makes me excited to get up and do my job.
Yes.
Even on days when it's going to be hard, I'm like, ooh, today's going to be so hard.
Yep. Well, this week is going to be hard because of everything that's happening on the 17th. So, so give me like a hardcore example of how your growth, your personal growth has had a positive effect, whether it's on the business as a whole or on a colleague or a member of your team, one of your agents. Can you think of an example where this has really turned maybe a difficult situation and flipped it?
Yeah, I think it's such a good question. I think it's hard for me to select one particular situation, but I will tell you it's easier for me to find calm in chaos right now.
Yeah.
And that in itself is an enormous gift to me. And I do think it's a gift to the people around me too, because rather than, you know, constantly saying, oh, is that done yet? And are you sure? Blah, 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 blah. You know, we're having calm, intelligent conversations about the next step. And I work with these brilliant people who right now are collaborating so hard together. And it's the whole team, but in particular, you know, we've got our in-house counsel, Richard Sullivan. We've got our chief brokerage officer, Jeff Tarzali, and we've got our VP of brokerage development, who's Daphne Field. And each one of them is so experienced and knowledgeable. And I have been able to remain calm with them, right? Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean every moment, but with them. Mm-hmm. And instead, I think we've grown closer together. I have already had so much respect for them, but I will tell you that my love for them has grown because I've watched them and I've heard the questions they've asked, and the questions that they keep asking are, but I'm worried that this is going to be too complicated for the agents. Yeah. Like, how are they going to explain this? Like, that's the worry, not like, well, how do I protect my job? Or how do I protect it's how can I make this easier on them? Yeah. And so I think in the past, this would have been keeping me up at night. It would have been making me so much more anxious and stressed out in my daily experience. But with this better understanding of how we're connected and being able to appreciate one another and to be able to be kind to myself has allowed me to remain present in the moment when it feels like I've answered this question 165 times. And I'm going to answer it again. And by the way, I'm excited to answer it because I get to help this person. Yeah. That's different than old me. Old me would have been like, just send it out in an email and read the email. I know. And now I'm like, this is hard for this person.
Yeah.
I can feel how hard this is.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful that they trust me enough to come to me and go, I think you've already answered this a lot. But can I ask you a question? Like, the fact that they trust me to do that is a gift.
Yeah.
And that is so good. So I don't know if that's exactly the kind of concrete example you're looking for, but
It is.
that has been huge for me.
And I feel like you've cultivated this team, intentionally brought these particular people to the table because they have the same mindset, and it allows you to not have the pressure of being the one.
Yeah.
You're doing it and making those decisions together. And yes, I'm assuming you're the final decision maker,
yeah.
But man, you're doing it in a way that everybody, one, feels heard. And two is considering all of the stakes, right?
Yep.
And so you're making the best decision for the agents and the company as a whole. I love it. I love it.
Yeah, we're all very different. Like if you sat down and talked to Jeff or Richard or Daphne, you're going to hear a totally different tone of voice. You're going to hear a totally different set of life experiences. You're going to hear we're just different people, but I think that makes us stronger.
Mm-hmm.
The more different kinds of voices you have at the table, the stronger
Yes.
you are. It doesn't mean that every conversation is going to be enjoyable. Sometimes you're going to be defensive, that's just normal. But I think that's hugely important. And it's also really important to give yourself some grace as a leader. In other words, I know that I measure 12 times so I can cut once, right? So knowing that means that moving forward, if I learned new information that means that wasn't the best decision, that's okay. Given the information I had at the time, that was the best decision. So, I think that's hugely important. But again, I'm not the smartest person in that room. But what I'm good at doing though, I think of myself almost as like a quilter or something like that. It's like, how do I take this piece from this person, that piece from that person, and then we can sew it together and we've got like the right solution.
Yeah.
It's very rare that I'm saying we have to go in a totally different direction than everybody else.
Yeah. That's awesome. So, how or in what ways do you encourage or inspire the people you work with to adopt sort of some of the practices and the things that you've learned?
Yeah. So, it's so interesting. I was telling my wife this the other day. It's a distinction that I make. I think leadership in our industry is harder than it is in other industries. And here's the reason why. As a percentage, the number of employees we have is actually pretty low. They're mostly independent contractors.
Mm-hmm.
So in an employee company, like let's say we were, almost 600 employees, we could tell them to do something and they would have to do it or go elsewhere, whatever. But because we are mostly independent contractors, it's all about trying to not only like you would with employees, figure out what's the right move for this whole company so that we're doing right by each other and we're doing right by the organization. But it becomes, how do I help these people understand what we're trying to tell them to do and to be excited to move forward with that direction and I think it's made us better leaders because it's not about here's the edict and get it done. It is, hey guys, here's something that we're noticing. Here's what we're worried about, but here's the path to a safer or better future. And I think it makes us better leaders for our employees as well, because that's our frame of mind. Doesn't mean we don't make mistakes. Of course we make them every day, but I think that kind of leadership is just different. And I think of that as also being the difference between a manager and a leader. Mm-hmm. A manager is like, here's your job, come back when you're done and I'll give you another one. And a leader says, here's what we're trying to get to. How do you think we should do that?
Yes.
And helps empower that person to come up with ideas. And then if you've got more experience and you can see the flaws, help them find another way around that. So that's really the way that we approach it. And, given the challenges we're going through in our industry right now, I know that the best thing we can do as leaders is to empower our agents with all of the information they can have so they have mastery over the topic, because mastery then leads to confidence. And when you have confidence, you have those conversations
Yes.
Now, if you don't have mastery and confidence, what's naturally going to happen is people are going to turtle. They're going to hide. I don't want to talk about, I'm going to wait until this whole thing blows over and then I'll have conversations after it's done.
Yeah.
So the way past that is to empower people with knowledge, but then also to help them understand it's okay if you don't have all the answers in the moment. It's okay to say, oh, I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but let me just check on that and I'll get right back to you.
100%.
So that's sort of, that can help you understand how we approach things. And that comes from Larry, honest to God. I feel like I had not even a master's, but a doctorate in leadership sitting at that man's feet. And he still continues to, give me a call and go, yeah, I would do that a little differently. And here's why. And then I go, yeah, but he's always supportive about it. Like, I see where you came from, but let's look at this. And so he's just an extraordinary leader. And I work alongside Nicole Rideout, who is one of his daughters, and his other daughter, Amy. And I learn from those guys on a daily basis too. I learn from Michelle. I learn from everybody I work with.
Yeah.
Some of them are almost 20 years younger than I am. And I work with people who are 20 years older than I am.
Yeah.
So we're all learning from each other. It's not so like great. This one direction. It goes both ways.
I love that. I love that. So let's switch from your role as CEO to your role as parent.
Sure.
And how does this a personal growth journey, how has it affected you as a parent to Albert?
Oh God, I'm so much more present. And I think being present is half the battle as a parent. And I don't mean just physically being there, because that is also a challenge for many of us, who are working, is like, how can I physically be in the same space while we're both awake?
Yeah.
But a lot of it is being present. So for instance, on those walks, I will take him when he'll come with me, when I can convince him to. And we talk. And I found that is really good connection time, where he'll just tell me a story, or we'll play what he likes to call the question game. Here's the topic. You're going to ask me questions now, mama. Yeah. And so then I have to ask him questions about the topic and learn about this thing that he's got mastery over. And it might even just be what happened to him that day. But I think physically being present, emotionally being present with him is a big piece of it. I shared all of the challenges, and I asked for his permission, as well as my wife's, to take the time to go to the gym and to go for those walks, and the reason was because I needed that. If they were going to fight me on it, this is not going to work.
Yeah.
So they became allies, and if I was kind of slow to get up, Albert would be like, don't you have a walk to go on? Aren't you supposed to be going to the gym tonight?
I love it.
It was helpful, but I will tell you that I share with him the challenges that I have. And because I see my job as making myself obsolete, essentially, is I want to empower him with the experiences I've had when I can relay them in a way that makes sense to him.
Yeah.
Where he can either be part of the solution or just hear what the solution was, or hear about a mistake I made, because I share those with him too. Oh man, I really upset this person, and here's what I did. And he'll go, oh, that was the wrong move. I'm like, I know it was the wrong move. Yeah. So it's about, it's being really human. Mentoring. Yes, it's being human and mentoring.
Being human. Yeah. I apologize to my son when I've made a mistake, Me too. Yeah.
Me too.
They have to hear that you're not, the almighty. I mean, there's a flip side of that, which means then they make you accountable for things.
Yes.
And then sometimes, especially as only children, they think that they have it's a democracy and they have a vote, but that's a whole other conversation. But
it totally is. But I agree with you. I am the first to fall on the sword at home and at work if I screw up.
Yep.
And I think it's important. It's an important lesson for him to hear. And it's an important lesson for the people I work with to hear, because I want them to feel comfortable doing that too. I think if people are afraid of making mistakes because they don't see you owing up to your mistakes, they think that mistakes are tragic. Yeah. And they're deadly, right? So then they will either avoid mistakes, which means no innovation.
That's right. No risk. Yeah.
Right. Or they will make them and try desperately to cover them up, which is poisonous to any culture. So I think if people see that you're okay with going, I screwed that up, man, oh man, but look how beautifully I did that. Isn't that horrible?
Yeah, right.
So what do we do now to fix this darn thing that I messed up? I think it's helpful. And I'm so lucky that I work with people who trust me enough to tell me when I'm screwing up.
Yeah.
Because that's hugely important. I can't always
value it.
Yes. Yep.
I mean, having that same value, that's a big deal. And I love how there's so much polarization and so much divisiveness happening in our country right now. And yet there's this evolution of an empathetic, vulnerable leadership that's happening.
Yes.
That's everything that you embody. And I think, God, can we just continue to grow and get there and allow it to surpass all of the negativity that's happening out there? That would be like the best thing ever.
Some of that is that we need to connect with one another again. I mean, this is the balm for every problem we have, right? That's the salve that would cure us.
Yeah.
And many of my close friends we are not politically aligned at all.
Yeah.
At all. I don't care.
Yeah.
Because I love who they are. And I'm one of those people who believes in the goodness in most people. I mean, there's a really tiny sliver of our society who is, it's like a serious mental issue where they have no empathy for other people. I can't solve that. And that can be really dangerous, but everybody else is good. There are people, I'm a gay woman. So there are people who don't even believe I have the right to live. And yet those are the same people who would pull my body out of a burning car on the highway, So I think, again, it's about programming. It's how have they been programmed? What's the fear that's surrounding, their thoughts? What's the anger or whatever else is going on? Yeah. It's about their programming, and it's not about them are they good human beings or bad human beings? Most of us are really good. We're doing our best.
Totally agree. So we're going to start to wrap up. And as we do, I have a couple of questions for you. The first is, what are the 3 most important things you want to leave our community with today?
Oh, I think the 3 things that I would share, one is to be kind to yourself, and take care of yourself. That's one. I think that kind of comes across in the journey that we've talked about. The second is it's all about skill acquisition. So in life or in your career, just because you don't have an experience, you don't have a skill, doesn't mean you can't get it. I mean, genuinely, Christine, you and I could become brain surgeons if we had the right teachers in the amount of time we needed to learn that skill. We would be brain surgeons. So even brain surgery isn't brain surgery. Just chill out. Find the resources to develop the skills you want. And the last is, I guess, do more than is required.
Yeah.
That is where in a career things lift off, when the people around you feel as though, gee, she's doing a little extra, and particularly if that more than is required does something to help those around you, you will find that the way that people see you is just that much better. So I guess those are the 3 lessons.
I love it. And I think you feel better too. Your whole self-worth goes up.
Absolutely. When I was answering phones, we got a coffee maker in there, an espresso maker. And I asked for that. And it was such a long story, but I asked for it from a colleague who said, yeah, I can get that. A friend of mine works at Lavazza. I'll get us stuff. And it made me feel so good every day that when people walked in and they were exhausted, and they were shocked at what the prices were going to be on these rentals they were going to stick their college kids in, that I could say, would you like an espresso or a cappuccino or a latte or something? I mean, the look on their face, that made my life better. Yeah. Every day I left work feeling better because of that. So do more than is required.
The simple things and you have carried that all the way through to where you are today. I love that. All right. Last question.
Okay.
Finish this sentence. Know, like, trust is
the driver of a great business. It is. And a great career. Without those things, what are you doing? Honest to God. And I think what I would say is I remember years ago hearing that if you're stuck with the purpose of your life and you don't know what you should be doing and you're a little lost, write your own obituary. Because that will tell you how you want to be remembered. And that tells you what you got to do now. Yeah. And I think know, like, trust it's what makes the life that you've led, the career that you spent all this time on, something that you're proud of at the end.
Yeah.
That if people say she was a leader that people knew and they liked and they trusted, that's all I can ask for.
I love it. Colleen, thank you so much for being here. I so appreciate your time. I adore you. I feel like I've known you my whole life.
I know we connected immediately. That was definitely one of those moments.
Yeah. Thank you so much for everybody who's listening. Thank you so much if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you click that subscribe button to get all the latest episodes as we bring them out. And if you're listening and you like what you're hearing, please share with your friends. Give us a 5-star review. Tell us what you think. And for now, until next time, have a great day, everyone. Ciao.